Jane here from Poppy Patchwork. In today's video I'm going to show you how to take a pile of fabric scraps and turn them into a lovely table runner. I've called it the Diamond Treasure Table Runner. So I had a lot of 2.5-inch squares left over from a previous project, and I knew I wanted to make a table runner. I came up with this pattern. I don't know if it's got a name, but using the fabrics and the colours that I had, I decided to have all the blue fabrics running down the centre of the pattern, accented with these red fabrics here. So I had lots of the green left over, so I knew I could use more of the green along the sides. I didn't have that much of the very dark reds, so I wanted to use these as the accents here. I had some reds with kind of a mottly effect, so I'm going to use those down the sides of the table runner. And then I'm going to have a self-coloured blue border all around, ending in a point here. So I'll show you how to construct the table runner. So initially, focusing on the centre part of the table runner, I'm going to cut the blue fabrics from a 2.5-inch square. I'm going to cut those down to make 2-inch squares. The red accent fabric, the 2.5-inch square, is going to be cut in half twice to make 4 1.25-inch squares, and the green squares, they're going to be cut in half once here to make a rectangle which is 1.25 by 2.5 inches, and then the other rectangle is going to be cut in half to make 2 1.25-inch squares. The triangle pieces will come onto later, so initially that's what you need to cut. So the layout is the blue square in the middle, the red accent squares diagonally opposite, and then I've got the green square on this side next to the red square, and on this side I've got it behind the red square, and then the rectangles making up kind of the difference in the jigsaw. The way in which I'm going to sew them together is to start by sewing these 2 small squares together. Then I will join the rectangle to those 2 squares, and then I will cut that down to size. And then I will join the blue to this unit, and then I'll create this unit on the other side, and I will join that to that unit there. So it will end up looking like this. Let me bring that back into shot there. So it will end up looking like that. So I've made up all these 3 unit blocks, and I've just put a selection of them down on the table so that you can see how it's forming together. So this is the centre of the table runner, and what we now need to do before we can start sewing each of these to each other, we need to put the setting triangles on the ends of each of these 3 unit blocks. So they will sit like this. So I'm just going to put a couple down so you can see how it might look. It's the same. I'll try a different one. Let's have a look there. So these triangle setting blocks are now going to go on the ends of these 3 unit blocks. So you create the setting blocks by taking a bring it down here so that you can see. I'll move that over. There we go. There we go. So you do this by taking a 2.5 inch square. Bring that back in here. There we go. So you take a 2.5 inch square and you cut it from corner to corner diagonally like this, and then you get your 2 triangles out of that. So the way in which you sew the triangles onto your 3 unit block is quite important. So using this feature fabric as a guide, we are going to sew the triangles with the right angle here on the same edge as that feature fabric. So on this side the right angle is down here, whereas on this side the right angle is over on this side. Again, that's your feature fabric and it's on the same side as the feature fabric. So we're going to sew them right sides together along the short edge of the rectangle, like so. So we're going to sew from here to here and also from here to here. So once we've done that, this is what your unit is going to look like. So we're going to have one of the triangles is sewn on here and one of the triangles is sewn on here. By doing it in this way, it'll all work out. Now I've chosen to sew the same fabric of triangle on each end of the 3 unit block, just so that I know where I am and I don't get lost. You can be as random as you want. You can have different fabrics on either side of the 3 unit block, it doesn't matter, but I've chosen to sew the same fabric on either side of the 3 unit block. So now I am going to pop these triangles on the ends of each of my 3 unit blocks. So I've now sewn all the triangles in place and we can now start to join these units together. Before I'm going to do that, I'm going to just cut off the dog ears that you get when you sew triangles together. You get lots of these little dog ears. So I'm going to cut those off before I join 2 pieces together. So I'll move these out of the way. So now these 2 pieces can be joined together, and it's really a case now of matching the seams and pinning them. So first of all I'm going to match the 2 centre seams here and pop a pin in there, and then the next set of seams, pin that, and then I'm just going to pin at the end, keep everything in line. Okay, round the other side, pin in the next seam, and again pin the end together. So I'm now going to sew along this pinned side. So I've sewn all the strips together and laid the table runner out onto my ironing board so you can have a look at it. The next thing we need to do is I will show you how to end your table runner with a point. So we'll go over to the cutting board and I'll show you how to create points at the end of your table runner. So in order to create the point at the end, we have to take our unit that we made with just 2 units on it. So we've got the square, blue square in the middle, and then this 3-piece with the small red feature fabric here. And this is going to go there, and we're going to have to sew a setting triangle on the end here, and we're actually going to have to unpick this setting triangle here so that you end up with that. So I will go to the sewing machine now, and I will sew this setting triangle onto the end here, and I will unpick this setting triangle from here, and I will show you what that looks like. So I have now removed the setting triangle from this position here, and I've added a setting triangle onto this side, and now I'm going to sew these 2 pieces together like we did before. So the last pieces have been sewn onto the table runner and a point has been created, and you need to repeat that at the other end as well. There we go, the other end also. And before we can put the border strip on, what you want to do is just trim off the edges as far as possible. And to do this, what you're doing is where you've got the point here of the triangle, you need to make sure you've got 1/4 of an inch from that point to the edge of the fabric, and in some places that may not be the case, and you will want to trim that back. You want to do it as well as you can. There may be some places where that's more difficult, but as well as you can, trim the sides back so that you do have 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from the point of the square or the rectangle to the edge of your table runner. So I'm going to finish tidying that up, and then I'll show you how to put the border pieces on. So I've trimmed the sides of the table runner, and now we need to put the border piece. I'm going to do the 2 sides first. So what we're going to do is we're going to do right sides together, and I'm going to leave a bit of an overhang at the end here. I'm going to pin that in place, and then when I sew it, I'm actually going to sew it so that I can, from this side, I'll bring that down into the camera. So I'm going to pin this together, put a few pins in here. And normally when you sew there we go, so I've popped a few pins in here. Normally when you sew border pieces onto your quilt or your table runner, you would do it with the border piece on the top, but in this instance I'm going to do it so that I can see the back of the table runner, and that is because I want to be able to sew through these 1/4 inch seams. So where, I don't know if we can see that on camera, and where these 1/4 inch seams are here, I want to be able to stitch across those so that I don't lose the point when I have put the border onto the fabric. I want to still see the point. So So I've now sewn the border onto the table runner. They're not perfect, but I haven't blunted any triangles. I may have been a little bit generous on some, and it's possible that I'll go back and sew over that, but I'm generally pretty happy with that. Now that the border's been sewn on, what we need to do is trim this piece here at the corner. So we're going to line the ruler up following the corner of the table runner, and we're going to cut the excess fabric off the border piece. I'm going to do that at the other end also. And now I'm going to sew the other side on. So I've sewn the other border piece on, and do you know what, this time I decided to do it the correct way, which is to sew the border so that the border is on the top when you take it to the sewing machine, and I think I got a much better finish doing it that way. So I don't know if you can see particularly well, but this side I did with the sewed the border piece with the border piece on top. This side I sewed with the border piece underneath, and I think this has got a crisper, straighter finish, whereas this one is much more it's not flat finish, and I think the bias on these triangles has taken over really, and that's become made it not so flat and kind of perfectly nice really. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unpick this border, press both pieces again, and sew that border back on with the border piece on top when I take it to the sewing machine. We're going to get a nice crisper finish. But back to the second border piece that's been sewn on. Once again, what you need to do is trim those pieces down. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take this first bit border off, sew it back on again, and then I will trim this down, and I will show you how to finish the last two pieces at each end, the last two pieces of border at each end. So now I'm going to cut this excess fabric off here, and then we're going to sew another border piece to create the corner. So we've got another border piece of fabric here. We're going to sew that right sides together. I'm just going to avoid sewing on selvage. I'm going to pin that and sew it, and then I'll come back and show you the last piece that needs to be placed on the border on this end of the table runner. So one side of the corner has been sewn on, and now we just need to trim this. So lining the rule up against the long side of the table runner. So that's one side done. Now what we need to do is sew the other side on here. So the last strip has gone on for the border. I just need to trim that down. So once again, following the shape of the table runner, just trim that piece off there, and trim this piece here. So there we go. We have the point at this end, and you need to repeat and do the point at the other end. Okay, so I have brought the table runner over to the ironing board so that we can see it in full as I pan across. So I'm very pleased with it actually. I think I'm going to call it the Diamond Treasure Table Runner. What we need to do now is get some backing fabric and some wadding and sandwich it together, do some quilting and finish the table runner. So for the next bit of the process you need to cut some backing fabric. I've chosen to use this, which is the same as the border fabric, and then you'll also need to cut some wadding. So what I tend to do is cut the wadding slightly smaller than the backing fabric, and that wadding is slightly larger than the quilted piece, so that when I sandwich it all together I can see the three pieces and know that I've got everything in the right place. I'll show you that in a moment. So the first thing I do is I lay the backing fabric out on top of the wadding, and in this case I'm going to cut the wadding to the exact size of the backing fabric. So I tend not to use glue on small projects. I've basically just smoothed the backing fabric and the wadding. I've smoothed both sides and they kind of adhere and don't stick together, but I guess there's a kind of friction that keeps them from moving apart, and I find that that is enough for small projects. So what I tend to do is, first of all, I lay the backing fabric onto the wadding and smooth it out. I then flip it over and I smooth the wadding out. I then flip it back to check that I'm happy that the backing fabric is still smooth and it hasn't shifted, and then I flip it back over one more time now, ready to put the quilted piece or the patched piece on top. So now I'm laying the table runner on top, making sure that it has a sandwich of wadding and backing fabric, and again I'm smoothing that out, and I always work from the centre out. And once I've done that, then I use curved safety pins, and I pin the 3 layers together. So again, starting at the centre, I'm going to pop that pin in there. I'll probably put one out here on the edge. And opposite. And I'm just going to carry on and pin my sandwich together. So I've pinned it all the way down the centre and all the way down the sides. You can see, pinned it all the way down that way and all the way up here as well. So what I will also do now, as I'm pinning it together, is I do want to check the other side to make sure it's not getting wrinkled or rucked. So I flip it over and check, that looks pretty good to me. Looks nice and smooth on the other side. That's the seam, joining seam for the back piece, and that's pretty good this way as well. That's just a little bit of a wrinkle where it needs ironing. So, and here. So if it was getting a little bit wrinkled or rugged, I would just take the pins out from the other side and smooth it out again. So now I'm ready to quilt. With your table runner, obviously you can make it as long or as short as you want to, and you can make it as narrow or as wide as you want to. Probably wouldn't want to go any narrower than this, and these started out as 2.5-inch squares cut into 4. So if you wanted to make it wider, you would want to start with larger squares, and by starting with larger squares for these feature fabrics, everything else will become larger and therefore wider, and obviously a bit longer, and you'll get more length in your table runner if you have more fabrics to use. So for the quilting, I've done some quilting lines down through the border, and I've also done some quilting lines crisscrossing along the main section of the table runner. It's quite heavily quilted because I feel that is useful in a table runner, giving it a little bit more stability. So if you want to check out my binding video, just click on the link that's appearing at the end of this video. Otherwise, quilt as desired and bind, and you have a table runner. Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this video. Please like and subscribe to my channel. More of these videos will be posted, so please tune in. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.